Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the October meeting of the Public Works Committee. In attendance, we have Councilmember Scipio, Councilmember Larson, and voting Councilmember Burke to arrive. There she is, as we speak. Also in attendance, we have Councilmember Clark, Councilmember Mundy, and this afternoon we have items on our consent agenda as well as our general agenda. My New Jersey is not coming through as well without a microphone, is it? Okay, council members, are there any items on the consent agenda that we would like to pull to discuss?
C4.
C4, Councilmember Mundy.
C3, please.
C3, I was going to pull C3 as well. Is there anything else? Okay, if I could get a motion to approve the balance.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll approve the rest by voice vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any negatives? And that is approved. Okay, we could have C3, please.
Item C3, resolution authorizing the installation of a street mural at the intersection of Hawthorne Road and Northwest Boulevard pursuant to Section 7416 of City Code.
Mr. Fansler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Jeff Fansler, Director of Transportation. So as the item mentions, Section 7416 of the City Code does regulate and authorize the ability for street murals within our public rights-of-way. And what we have before you for consideration today is an application that our department received, and this is on behalf of the Public Art Commission. And I believe the contact there is Elizabeth Cohn. I might be
In attendance with us today.
Excellent, thank you. In attendance with us today regarding some artwork in the intersection of Northwest and Hawthorne. And so this application was reviewed by our staff, and then in accordance with the policy, we vetted that materials, fit and finish, and then the installation methods, and we agree that this meets the intent of Section 7416. And we have one thing I wanted to mention too is because this does come at the recommendation of the Public Arts Commission, and so it has been vetted there as well. And this does meet and satisfies the ordinance requirements. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any further questions, comments?
I didn't know that Bibi was going to be here, but I was going to say I worked with her at Sawtooth, and she's incredibly creative and artistic, and I can't wait to see this. My question is, what is our communications plan for the neighbors around this intersection? And also, what is the timing to make sure that we don't interfere with daytime schools or evening athletic events?
And so great question, Councilmember Mundy. So anytime we're working in the street, they will require a street closure permit, and so which we'll often establish some time parameters on that. So upon approval of this body and ultimately City Council, they would have to get a street closure permit to do this work, perform this work, and we'll issue some time parameters to make sure that we don't impact with the things that you're just talking about now. So we'll have some coordination after this to make sure that we address those concerns.
And then the neighbors around that, is it like a zoning where within a certain number of feet they get a note or a letter somehow advised?
Great question, Councilmember. With this policy and this procedure, we don't have any marketing campaign associated with that. We would certainly like to partner with the folks doing the work to have some communications to adjacent neighbors, but it's not part of the city requirement for this.
I think it probably should be some kind of the process, not necessarily for a marketing campaign, but just so that people know when they pull out of their driveway on this day, they might need to go the other way.
Fair enough.
Councilmember Scipio.
Yes, Mr. Fansler, I am in favor of this street mural. However, I just want to make sure that the public knows that we don't allow painting on our streets and sidewalks unless there is a permit.
Right.
Because I know that once people see things being painted, they have a tendency to say, oh, that's cool, so let me just go and do this on my neighborhood, in my street. So there is an ordinance that restricts that, and can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, so strictly the one we're talking about, 74-16, it restricts the painting on the city's public rights-of-way streets and sidewalks, subject to an application, which is what you're considering today.
Yeah, so if they do want to do that, they need to contact the city to
That's
file
right.
an application for that to happen.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Larson.
post a permit sign or any kind of information sign on the site that this is going to happen? Or is that addresses the concern?
Councilmember Larson, if they choose to paint our streets, they could contact our office, and we share that application for interested applicants.
Is the application posted then on the site? The permit posted on the site like a building permit?
I don't know that we have it posted on our website, if that's what you're asking.
Posted, I think, on the street.
Oh, on the
There's
site.
something on the street, over the site, that lets people know what's going on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, there's nothing that we would indicate. Outside this permit process, there's nothing that would be indicative of the work.
From answering the question of public information and neighborhood concerns, there was something posted on site a week in advance or 2 weeks in advance, and you'd have, you call in and they have questions or concerns about it. It's a great project. I really like it.
Sure.
I just think we ought to promote it. The process is important as the product.
So it sounds like our neighborhood outreach, there's an area for we can make our messaging clear on what the procedures are, and I think we could be looking at that for future applications.
I think on those, some of the comments around that, we have used social media, I think, fairly effectively before when we promoted some of these. I know the mural on 6th Street for the Pride Festival, we promoted that on there. I know that we've done on some other things to raise awareness around those. So I think that's an effective tool. We can always build on that, but I know we've done that in the past with some of these.
And we can look at something like door hangers to go around in the neighborhood. So there's some opportunities. We'll look for that.
Based on the amount of conversation around this intersection and the stretch of road from Rinalda Road to Hawthorne to First Street, and the amount of conversation we've had over the last 5 to 10 years, word's going to get around very quickly about this project. People will know.
Sure.
The amount of pedestrian traffic in that stretch is probably as dense and as great as any other stretch of roadway in the city of Winston-Salem. And it's middle schoolers and high schoolers.
Sure.
So, and grade schoolers. So this is an area that we've been looking for ways to calm traffic, and there are only so many solutions that we have. And I mean, the tools in our toolbox are limited. And so this is one that Bibby has really led the charge on, and other parents have been very involved in. So we're looking for any tools that we have that will work, and we think this is going to, Bibby has done a lot of research on this, and we really applaud her efforts on this, and other parents as well. So we really have our fingers crossed that this will make a significant impact, lowering speeds and getting people's attention and making them slow down, because the amount of foot traffic here is pretty significant. So Bibby, thank you for your efforts on this, and we look forward to this really making a difference. So thank you. Yes, Councilmember Scipio.
In the installation of this, is reflective paint being used so that it can be seen at night?
Actually, Councilmember Scipio, no. So we don't want that to be confused with the reflective paint that is required of traffic marking. So there's a distinction there. So, but there is good street lighting in the area, so nighttime you'll be able to see that. But we want the reflective paint to be the parallel transverse lines where you know where the crosswalk boundaries are, not interfacing or interacting with the reflect or with the other types of paint that will be used.
And we do hope this is a successful model.
Sure.
And it's picked up and used in other places. Okay, if I can get a motion.
Move for approval of C3.
Second.
All right, and we're going to vote. Thank you, everyone. All right. C4, please.
Item C4, resolution authorizing changes in the state highway secondary road system within the existing corporate limits of the city of Winston-Salem.
Councilmember Scipio.
Yes, I just needed just a quick overview of why it's important for us to sometimes change streets from the state to the city.
Sure.
And how it impacts us financially. What are we now responsible for?
Great question, Councilmember Scipio, and as you've probably heard me say in the past, we routinely look at our infrastructure regarding which streets and whose agency owns and maintains those streets. This particular case is unique because per the municipal interlocal agreement we had with the state, that agreement indicated that upon construction and after the warranty period, that street would be turned over to the city. So several years ago, we actually entered into an agreement with NCDOT that documented that transfer after the warranty period, which is now expired, is it's eligible to be transferred over to the city. I will say this, though, upon acceptance of this, we will be adding this to our POW bill for annual maintenance funds, and so it will be eligible for the state aid in that maintenance effort. And so moving forward, it'll be part of our overall POW bill program, eligible for those dollars. But it would include resurfacing, pothole repairs, signs, markings. Those are the type of maintenance efforts that are POW eligible.
We also have Shaylee Bowen here, if she would like to. G1. Oh, on G1, okay, never mind, jumped the gun here. Never mind. Mr. Fansley did an adequate job on that, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay,
I move for approval of C4.
all right. Vote when the vote comes up. All right, that's unanimous, thank you. Move on to G1.
Item G1, public hearing and consideration on ordinance to name an unnamed private right-of-way in the 500 block of South Peacehaven Road to Bradford Meadows Lane in the city limits of Winston-Salem, located in the West Ward.
Now, Ms. Bowen.
So good afternoon, Shaylee Bowen, Geographic Information Officer for Map Precise.
Good afternoon.
We received a petition from Amali Bradford concerning an unnamed driveway. She would like the driveway to be named Bradford Meadows Lane. Previously, she expressed concerns with deliveries and other services not making it to her address, which is currently 516 South Peacehaven Road, because they don't know that it's that far back off the road, which is a concern for us because of EMS and other type emergency responses that we would like to be able to get there. Not only is it a concern, but they also just recently met the 3 structure criteria. So past 3, we like for you to have a named road so that you have a dedicated address on your street, and so they meet that criteria. The name is nowhere else within Forsyth County, so the name also meets our criteria. And with that, are there any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Bowen? Yes, Councilmember Mundy.
I want to ask, make sure I don't ask a silly question. One of the items on the consent agenda had to do with naming roads and the requirements for that. So these two go hand in hand?
So Councilmember Mundy, I'll take that one. So currently, the way the addressing policy is set up in the city of Winston-Salem and the addressing manual is it requires a public hearing to be held at Public Works Committee, which is what we're going to do here in a few seconds. As you know, we don't do a lot of public hearings at the committee level, and so what staff has suggested in the item you approved on the consent agenda is to still have a public hearing, but do it in front of the full council. So moving forward, if this is adopted, the Public Works Committee would hear this, you would make a recommendation to full council, and at that point, we would hold a public hearing to provide input.
So it doesn't change the criteria?
No, the metrics, the methodology is still the same. It's just the location and the venue for the public hearing changes.
One additional question in the CARF, when I'm looking at the consent agenda, it says after fees have been paid and a new street name has been determined. What are those fees? That's one piece I did not understand.
So the fees for street naming,
Are those fees that are paid by the individuals who want to change the name?
yes, those are for the individuals that want the name changed. And they also are required to, if, for this example, everyone that lives there is family, but they also have to get notify their neighbors and get signatures of 75% of those. So there are 2 criteria that we require.
If we are dictating that a road needs to be named, do the residents still have to pay that fee, or is this just kind of a vanity fee, if you will?
I can't remember a situation where we are coming in to dictate a road be named. It's generally more something that is being caused on the private property that's necessitating the name change that's getting us to a point like this. I can't think of a situation where, well, there's been perhaps some of these where the Beltway has cut segments of road in half. So NCDOT, by constructing the Beltway and cut a road segment, you can't have disconnected road segments. There's been some in there. But in those cases, I don't know that we would make them pay any application fee. There would be new signs installed. We would pay for those. Really, the only, issue for those homeowners is going in and changing their water bill, their banking accounts, and their credit card addresses and those kinds of things.
Okay. That makes me feel better because, we ask state and federal government not to give us unfunded mandates. So if we're telling them to change, that we want a name changed or to have a name that's not already there, it doesn't quite seem right for them to pay for it. But if it's at their request, I've got no problem with that.
Those are the only instances I can think of in recent memory has really been beltway disconnecting segments of streets.
Thank you for all those explanations.
All right, this is a public, yes.
This is a private road.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's what I thought, yeah. This is their road.
They maintain it.
Yeah.
All right, this is a public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience, no one has signed up, anybody in the audience that wishes to speak for or against this? All right, seeing no one, I close the public hearing. Would anyone like to make a motion on this?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. So I'll vote on this. All right, that's unanimous.
Thank you.
Very much. Let's go to item G2.
Item G2, consideration of items related to modernization of on-street and municipal maintained off-street parking systems throughout downtown Winston-Salem.
Mr. Hutchins, thank you very much for bringing this one up to us.
Of course. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee and council. Reed Hutchins, Transportation Operations Manager. I think we have a presentation here. All right, so this is a follow-up presentation from when we presented last month at the September Public Works Committee meeting. There's some new information. A lot of it we talked about last month. We're going to talk about some of the outreach we did in the past month. All right, so kicking things off, we've gone over the state of the parking program a few times here. Current state is a lot of broken gate arms. The ticket spitters are from 1999. Our meters are clouded over. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Require a lot of maintenance time, a lot of staff time to take a look at those. The pay stations that you see on the street in this area also are showing that it's a lot of maintenance to those. The batteries die, the solar panels on the top are breaking. It's really our infrastructure is kind of failing us at this point. So what we've been talking about this entire time is modernizing the entire program. This program hasn't had a good look at it in 10 or 15 years. We're really pushing the user experience with all this. Modern equipment by way of a mobile payment app to allow parkers to use the mobile app to book a parking session when they pull up on the curb. Convenient transactions using a debit card through the app, a phone number, toll-free number. They could scan, or not scan, they could use that location number to then go to a website. And really what we're trying to do is streamline this for the user as well as our staff, our parking enforcement staff. And this also, with a partnership with Pay by Phone, which is the chosen vendor, it does allow us to do the flexible and dynamic parking rates for special events. I don't think that's something we're looking to bring on right at the beginning, but once we get this underway and we can start collecting that good, rich data, that's something that we're looking to explore. And really one of the big things is we've talked on the $700,000 or so subsidy that we have yearly in the parking program. Our rates haven't been increased, our technology's failing us, so we haven't really been bringing in and seeing this program to its full potential. So we're trying to reduce that subsidy. So what are we considering today? A lot of ordinance changes to support this technology solution. There's some appeal processes that will be put in place that our staff will handle. Setting the on-street rate to $1.50 and leaving the off-street rate at our 2 parking decks and our surface lots at $1 per hour. Increase the parking violation fines so that it's not convenient to just pull up and then accept that you're going to get a ticket or risk getting a ticket. And then establish the framework for electric vehicle charging in municipally managed parking garages. A little overview of the scope of the project. Our on-street, we have about 1,400 spaces. We do have room to expand. We're planning to bring on most of our enforcement area with those areas that we could kind of branch into once we kind of get the program up and running and working out the issues that we might anticipate at the very beginning. Signs are to be installed with a clear city logo, and we're prepared to do a marketing push to let people know if you see the City of Winston-Salem logo, it's a municipally managed parking area. So our off-street solution, it's going to use LPR cameras, license plate reading cameras. They will scan your license plate when you come in the parking garage and as you exit. If you don't pay using the app, you will be issued a violation. We're looking at implementing that towards the back end of 2025. We have about 1,600 spaces in all those lots that we've detailed out right there. So we have about 3,000 spaces, a lot of parking spaces in our downtown area. So as I mentioned, pay by phone. So that was the chosen app that we did an RFQ. We scored them, staff scored it. They were the highest firm. They're well respected in the parking industry. So how this works is if we set the rate at $1.50 per hour as the city, that is what the number will be when you pay on the app. There are fees associated with it. There's for example, the way that Pay by Phone makes their money is there's a transaction fee, a 30-cent transaction fee, and then there's an additional credit card processing fee. The city of Winston-Salem is going to cover all those fees, so when we say it's $1.50, it's really $1.50, and there's no confusion there. So let's talk about the parking rates for just a second here. So currently, as you know, we have the off-street facilities, which are parking decks, our surface lots. Those are to remain at $1. And then the meters we have at 25 cents. They're the ones that are failing us. And then the pay stations are $1 that are also sometimes failing us. If you see the proposed rate structure, it cleans it up a lot using this mobile payment and the Pay by Phone app. It's calling for the removal of meters and pay stations, phasing those out once we get the program up and running. This will help our staff a lot by not having to do the outreach with the citizens that say the meter's broken. Well, now I've got to call a staff person to get the meter fixed. Oh, the meter doesn't fix. Now we're just relying on technology. As I mentioned earlier, we're looking at the parking violation fines going from $15 to $30. That falls well in line with our peer cities, Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, Asheville, all of those. And like I said, we want to try to make it not convenient for people to park and risk getting a ticket and not pay for the parking. So the long-term vision for the parkers, this is what we want from the user experience. We want that one-time setup. We want one app. We want to try to be as streamlined as possible. We want it to make it easier to park at our city facilities. We're updating a lot of the processes, new payment options by using the app, the website, and the location number, and then, like I mentioned, the easy-to-navigate signage with the city logo on it. Operationally, for staff, the updated signage, less maintenance. The parking enforcement vehicles will be outfitted with LPR cameras, and we will streamline their process so they eventually will not have to get out of their vehicle at all. The ticket will go directly to the citizen if it is issued, which raises safety and efficiency for our staff. The automated processes in the parking decks with the LPR cameras will cut down on staff time immensely. You ride in, ride out. It takes a picture of your license plate and the ticket, or you're either validated and you can go on your way. Data availability, this is a huge thing for staff. Right now, it's very hard to really pinpoint how many transactions we do in a day, year, things like that. This allows us to see transaction records. We can see which areas of downtown are the hot zones, which ones aren't being utilized, and that's where that dynamic pricing could come into play further on down the road. And then, like I mentioned, the reduced maintenance. This is going to greatly decrease the amount of staff time that we are out there trying to work on a meter that accepts quarters. And then, so what does the city of Winston-Salem do or get from modernizing the parking program? We're the city of arts and innovation. We live up to that motto. We're a leader in parking management. All the people that I've talked to and worked with throughout this project saying that this is awesome. They're trying to get to this point in their municipalities as well. We're creating a solvent parking solution so that people can come into our city, get out of their car, park easily, and then when they leave, they don't have to worry about am I going to get a ticket? It's very clear. And then, so we'll be able to invest in future capital maintenance. Once we get the program up and running, we can get that data and then eventually probably come back to this committee and see what did we learn, what could we improve upon, and here's what we've been doing. So since the last meeting, we held 2 public meetings. We held one during the day at the Caladium, and then we held one in the evening at the Benton Convention Center. A lot of the comments that we received, we were mainly anticipating. There was a lot of support for the effort, a lot of emphasis placed on the enforcement hours and the difference between like a time-restricted zone versus a metered zone, so there was a lot of education. So one of my biggest takeaways from the meetings was, how do we market this? And I've talked with Pay by Phone on how we can really push this out, make sure that the citizens know these are the changes that are coming, these are what we're trying to accomplish here, and we're not trying to just to make the most money in the world off this program. We're trying to make this program to where people come into our downtown and feel comfortable parking without the risk of a violation or things of that nature. We also heard comments from the rate being too steep, the increase. We understand that 25 cents to $1.50 it's going to hurt for a little bit. One thing that we like to say with that is we're trying to really publicize our off-street facilities. That's why we're keeping those at $1 an hour. If we push the people or encourage the people to go to our off-street areas, our off-street parking garages, they're pretty empty right now. So if we can incentivize almost people to go to our off-street areas, that's what we're trying to do here. And then, like I said, how will we market the rollout? I think we're prepared to work with our marketing and communications department alongside the Pay by Phone marketing and communications team to really market this heavily, make sure everybody's comfortable using the program. All right, so what's next? Looking at city council consideration, public works consideration today, October, November. Issuing a notice to proceed in November of 2024 to Pay by Phone and G-Techna, which is the enforcement provider, and then looking at implementation sometime in spring 2025 with more changes coming towards the back end of the year. All right, I'll take any questions or comments.
Councilmember Scipio.
Just needed a little clarification about our off-street parking or the use of the decks. Monthly renters, will they still have the card access to come into the deck, or how do we manage that with monthly renters?
Yeah, great question. So it's going to be kind of a mixed bag. So it's going to vary from each location, and we're going to work with those renters. So for example, 4th and Church, where we have Reynolds and we have the Kempton and those places, we are looking at still having a card reader alongside the cameras there, and that's just a way to validate. We have a long-term lease with Reynolds that does have some language in there surrounding card readers, so we want to make sure that we're all on the same page with that one. For example, 6 Cherry Trade, where it's the Mass General Store, for example, we'll work with those people who have the leases to validate their license plate, so every time they come in and out of the parking deck, they won't have to worry about doing an extra payment to Pay by Phone, because we will already have collected their monthly fee either in revenue or through the Pay by Phone process.
Something very selfish. I have a card access to all of our parking decks. Does that go away?
So, no.
How'd you get that?
Somehow I got that one day.
So what I'll say to that, the very simple answer is our office will have the capability to validate anybody who needs access to our parking facilities. We'll work with every City of Winston-Salem employee to make sure that if they need access to a parking lot, we'll give them access. So the answer is yes.
And finally, handicap spaces, how are they being handled? Is the fee the same? Are we going to have more or fewer handicap spaces on the street or not?
So currently, I think we have about 16 on-street handicap spaces. And this has been a great, we've spent a lot of conversation over this. So the way that this will work, on street, if you have a handicap placard and you pull up to a zone with one of our signs, the expectation is, and you don't park in one of the designated handicap spaces, the expectation is that you pay. So how that will work, if it's a 2-hour zone, you will pay, you'll have their pay by phone, you have a capability to let them know if you're handicapped. And then that way, if you pay for the maximum hours, our enforcement will then have a trigger to show that you could pay there, or you could stay there longer, or you can move. It really depends on how the zone is set up. So currently, if you park in a 2-hour zone and you pay for those 2 hours, but you have a handicap placard, you could technically park there all day, as long as you pay for the initial 2 hours. With this way, it's just more of a technology-based solution.
I think, Reed, correct me if I'm wrong, the answer to Councilor Scipio's question is we're really not changing the curb, the location, number, quantity of handicap spaces with a curb usage policy associated with.
No, yes. Yeah.
Councilmember Burke?
Thank you. Thank you, Reed, for this presentation. For the public meetings that were held, the two, do you have numbers for community members who were in attendance? Okay.
Yeah, so I'll say, I don't think we have a definite number for each, so I'm gonna do some guessing here, and other members of staff, if I misspeak here. So I'd say the first one, we had a good mix of the downtown business owners, the downtown bike patrol. I'd say we had about 25 people, and then the one in the evening, maybe 40 to 50 people, so.
Thank you. I was just, before it comes back in November, before we proceed, I think that it would be good to consider maybe surveying a larger portion of the community, just throughout the city. I don't know, maybe putting it on the website just to get some feedback, because downtown will need to be, the changes that come, they will, we need to inform everybody, make sure we get some feedback. I'd love to hear what everybody's thinking.
Understood.
Councilmember Larson?
Thank you for this presentation. I am an admitted Luddite, so you have to understand that I am not technologically savvy. So taking that into consideration, this is where I'm coming from. If I'm coming down from Kernersville or from Mount Airy someplace to come to shop in Winston-Salem, and I drive downtown, am I going to be able to get a parking space?
Yeah.
How will that work? Do you expect me to get a QR code first, or some sort of app has to go onto my phone, which I don't have, by the way?
Yeah. So yes, so you will have to download an app, and if you don't want to download the app, there is a toll-free number that you could do. If you're coming downtown, just say once a year to come to the courthouse, let's say. There is that option to just do it one time, and you can pay over the phone. So for people in Kernersville, they'll drive up to our curb space, they'll see the clearly branded sign. A lot of people, from my experience, a lot of people already have the pay-by-phone app, so it's just a matter of pulling it up while you're on the curb space in Winston-Salem, and then paying if you have your license plate or your credit card information saved.
So we're not going to. It's not going to be a cash economy. It's not going to be a credit card economy.
It's going to be. There's going to be no cash collected in the parking program anymore.
So payments will be done over the phone by using my credit card. I'll have to call in my credit card number.
Correct.
And that goes on file somewhere.
So if you do it, if you pay using the telephone number, it doesn't store any of your information. They run a transaction the one time, and then it goes away. If you use the app, it saves your credit card information. And that way, if you visit downtown a lot, that's where the convenience comes in. So you don't, it's the one-time setup. But using the phone number, it's just you give them the credit card, you pay, and then you would leave after your session is up.
In reading through the comments that were issued in the public hearings that you had, a couple of themes seemed to come out. One was security of the system. Two was the matter of having, basically, price increases seem to be extraordinary for most people who are dealing with, particularly downtown workers and other people that are dealing with marginal incomes. Concerned about the ability to absorb these costs, and how flexible you are in assigning the 150 particular, what has traditionally been a 25-cent hour, half hour. Maybe you can address at least that. Of the $1.50, we know that some of it's now going to the operator, to the licensed company that's going to manage this, which we have no track record of working with. That 150, you can break it down into whatever, how much the city's going to benefit from this.
Yep. Well, Councilman Larson, this is Jeff. I want to answer your first part of the question. The 150 is a big change from 25 cents. We understand that. We heard that in our public comments that we just highlighted. One of the things that we did do was benchmark peer cities, as Reed mentioned, and we looked at where we are in the market statewide from comparable cities. In addition to that, Reed also mentioned that subsidy that we're subsidizing every year from the general fund to support the parking program, and that $1.50 is where we really need to be to kind of eliminate that subsidy. And then the hope with we have enough folks that continue to visit downtown that allows for some capital maintenance from our parking decks, from the signs that we'll be deploying. The overall downtown parking program needs a maintenance fund, right? And I think that $1.50, we think with projections of how many folks and the turnover that we're seeing, how many tickets we're writing, that allows us to eliminate that subsidy and hopefully put some money away for some of those capital maintenance needs over time, right? So that's at a high level. I think on the second part of that is one of the things too, you mentioned that there's a security component of this. We will have a contract with this vendor, right? And I think as upon approval, right, which is the ultimate goal today and then City Council in November, upon approval, we'll have to make sure that we get that contract language right, to make sure that we have the right language in that contract. We're working with our attorney's office to make sure that those security efforts are addressed in the contract, to make sure that we have a platform that users feel comfortable with and that we address those security needs. These folks do this, they do this across the state, and this nut has been cracked in other places, and we'll make sure that we review that language in those contracts to make sure that the application is consistent and the security risks are minimized for our rollout here in Winston-Salem.
I'm a little concerned. We're working on the assumption here that totally everybody has a phone.
So that's another option, and Councilmember Larson, we did hear some of that. I don't have a phone, what do I do, right? And we're gonna have to make some hard decisions at City Council, I think, because that sample size exists. I'd argue that it's just not a large pool in our City of Arts and Innovation, but I think the bigger thing is too, we often get the calls on the flip side of that is, hey, I don't know that I have a quarter to come downtown. What do I do, right? And so we have to balance that. And I think when we're talking about subsidizing parking fund, we're going to get the greatest benefit by thinking about it from the flip side, and that there's more folks that do have the phone, and let us deal with as a staff and as competent staff to address those cases where we may not have a phone, now what? And let us handle that maybe on a case-by-case basis.
We've also reached out to the vendor. We're not the only city that has done this. There are lots of cities around the country who have already been through this program and are working on the same issue of how do we deal with people who don't have a credit card, don't have a phone.
Yeah.
So that's an issue that we will deal with as we move along. Councilmember Clark?
Yeah, the QR code, this is a national company, isn't it?
It is a national company, and correct me if I'm wrong.
So my kids are a lot more proficient than I am.
Really?
I suspect they got it on there, and there's probably cities all over the country that have that same QR code.
So
Go ahead, Reed.
So I want to clear up the QR code. There will be no QR code on our signs. There's a lot of security risk with QR codes. People put their QR code over our sign, and it leads you to all kinds of crazy websites. So we will not have a QR code. So that, yeah.
You'll just have an app address.
Yep. So you'll pull up to the space. It'll geolocate you to your curb. You'll click on the zone on the map. It'll show the location that matches the sign on the curb, and then you go through the payment process.
Okay. I am not on this committee and have not been here for a number of the meetings, but I do think to subsidize downtown parking to the tune of $700,000. I would say when I go, the main deck I use is the one beside the convention center because I'll go up to Liberty Street. Yeah. It's broken more than it works. And that's true also of the lot which direction is it, out here?
Fourth and Cherry, or
No, the one right beside the building.
City Hall North.
The person has to go to lunch or whatever, it's free parking till they come back. So I do think there's going to be some bumps, but we're not the first people, we're not even the 100th city that has dealt with this. Every city is dealing with it, and I think, I have not seen a statistic of how many people have phones, but I bet it's 95+%. But anyway, I do support the modernization, and I'll leave it up to you smart folks to figure out which vendor to go with. Thank you.
Councilmember Scipio.
I think I may have told you this some time ago. My 90-year-old aunt told me this some years ago. If you don't stay current, you will be left behind. And that's about technology. So I understand people who want to be in their comfort zone and not have a smartphone or have a flip phone or not to be thinking about payment by phone. But we have to move forward, and we have to reduce our cost of doing parking. And I was the one who loved 25 cents parking. It's been that way since I was a child. So I've had many years added to me, and the parking rate needs to change. And yet $1.50 is still cheaper than many cities around the country that we have to go to. You pay $20 just in some cities just to get into a debt. But I think for us in Winston, once we approve this, we need to start right away alerting our citizens. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And it really needs a campaign that's across several months, because people have to get used to the idea, as opposed to it just happening and we have all of this chaos. One of the big things they really need to know is that if you don't pay it, it's $30. That's a fee. So we really need to get that out. We need to get it out soon. We need to get it out consistently so people are ready. People are going to still come downtown. That's going to happen. It's not going to stop because the parking went up to $1.50. They're going to come. But we want to eliminate some of the discomfort they may be experiencing because of the change. So let's anticipate getting them informed ahead of time. Thank you.
Councilmember Monday.
Councilmember Scipio said it had been 25 cents since she was a child, so that has to be, what, 40 years or so?
A little bit more than that, thank you.
But at least 50 years. So I think this should be a cautionary tale to this body and to the city as a whole, that if you don't move forward, you get left behind. And we just decided that we were not going to change, and it's biting us in the butt. It really is. So if we had made those changes all along, as we need to do going forward just to keep up with the world and to keep up with technology, we wouldn't be having this discussion. But I'm getting questions from some of my constituents about that $700,000 that's being covered by reserves, or it's in the operational budget, but it's being subsidized. What all is included in that? I know that it's maintenance to largely the decks, but is there a way we could get like a 5, 6, 7 line, the biggest items that are included in that?
Yeah, so happy to.
If you could send that out, then I could forward that.
And the biggest thing is the fact that the revenues that we're getting, because the equipment's broken, we're not getting the revenues to subsidize the cost of equipment, the labor for our tenants and the enforcement officers, right? So those capital expenses for just the program to support, like the people that run it, we're not getting the revenue to support that labor resource.
Yeah, and I know there are other pieces as well.
There
It's
are.
just I would speak to it better if I had that list to share with people.
We'll work with the budget office and provide a memo that highlights those details.
That'd be very helpful. when my small town in South Carolina eliminated parking meters, it wasn't to, this is 40 years ago, it wasn't to put in apps, but it was to provide free parking. It's a small town. But they sold all of those parking meters, and every single one sold as a piece of history and memory. And I don't know if we have a plan in place to do that, but I would hate to see them all trashed when they could actually generate some revenue.
So we've kind of jokingly had that conversation, and I think that we would work through our surplus process and probably put those on gov deals and go through the typical process on those. So we have talked somewhat about that at the appropriate time.
I think it would, rather than trying to get surplus money, I think it would, as a first step, give citizens that opportunity to buy a piece of history. So I'm just suggesting. You could even work.
Talk to your lawyer about that one.
The downtown Winston-Salem partnership or something with, if they manage the sales, then I think there are a lot of ways we could make it a win-win situation. And if that's, I don't know how other cities do it if it's illegal, but.
There's a statute that talks about surplusing city property and selling it under that procedure, but we'll see to what extent we can do what you've asked in light of that statute.
Seems like we could work around that. And I've still got a few more loading zones. Will those change? Loading zones where you can park for 15 minutes in front of where there are already loading zones.
Yeah, so loading zones will remain the same.
Okay. And, parking, the perception. I'm not saying it's true. I'm saying the perception is that our parking decks are incredibly dangerous, that if you go in, you're going to get robbed, possibly killed. A lot of hyperbole, but I do know that there are many times I go down a stairwell at night and there's no lights in that stairwell at all. We could improve our lighting. We could have motion sensitive lighting so that bright light comes on when you walk by, because a lot of crimes are not committed in bright light. I would even maybe consider, like we have a park ranger who rotates from one park to the next, even to have, it doesn't have to be a sworn officer, but a security person as we make this transition who could rotate from parking deck to parking deck, floor to floor, just to create that perception that, on the contrary, our parking decks are incredibly safe. I think we need to, the perception is there, whether the facts would bear that out, I don't know, but I think to change that perception, there are some things we could do that aren't tremendously expensive. So, thank you, Jeff.
All right, just a couple of quick notes. One of the efforts here is to take the on-street spaces in front of retail that are the most valuable from a customer standpoint. So retailers want those spaces open for their clients to come in and be able to park, get out of their cars and walk into the spaces like their customers want, and to take the folks that are now using those as cheap spaces where they can park all day long and take those people who are parking there all day long and move them to the decks. Our decks will remain the best value in town, $1.47 a day. You can park in a deck for $1.47 a day right now. Though that is not going to change, at least for some period of time. You can do the deal with the city and park in the deck for extremely cheap. So we want to push people off the street into the decks as much as possible, to leave the on-street spaces as open as possible for a John Q. public to come downtown and park. We are not changing after-hours parking and weekend parking rates. Those will stay the same. So the public has access to those spaces like they do today. We're still an incredibly good deal from a parking standpoint. The average citizen will probably not notice much of a difference at all. So this is not going to be an earth-shattering change to most people. So what it does do is it does allow us to not subsidize over $500,000 to the parking program every year. So honestly, this is a long overdue change that is very welcome in my opinion. I do want to talk about the outreach. Councilmember Scipio and I serve on the Downtown Partnership Executive Committee. There was a significant effort to talk to downtown retailers, and many of them did show up to our meetings, and a lot of them came in not real happy with the program. Most of those people that came in unhappy walked out going, okay, I understand. I see the reason why we have to do this. I'm in support of it. So the people that online were huffy came in, talked to us, and walked out understanding why we were doing this, and that we're actually in support. So I'm going to say that a fair amount of effort was made to people that were actually have felt like that we were doing the wrong thing, and now they understand why we're doing the right thing. So I think most of the online chatter that was negative really stemmed from the debate or the criticism that was lobbed a couple of years ago when the private lots went to private companies, and that created a firestorm that we were not engaged in, that we had no part in, but it raised a lot of, the hair back a lot of people's necks, and we took the brunt of the criticism, and we were not engaged in it. So once you set that aside, I think most people really understand that we were not a player in that. So much of that criticism really was undeserved. I went downtown. I was parking downtown the other day, and I got in my car, put the quarter in the meter, and a couple in front of me that were from Louisville, I found out, they were standing there struggling with a meter, and you could just tell they were getting kind of angry. They could not figure out how to work the meter, and it turns out the meter was broken. And you could just see the look on their face. They were just like, what's going on with this rinky-dink thing? And I walked up and I said, ma'am, it's broken. I said, stand there in front of, let me stand in front of the meter, take a picture of me, and call in. If you have a problem, just send that picture in, tell them I'm a council member, I will swear that the meter is broken, and you won't get a ticket. And I ended up catching the meter maid as she was driving by, and I said, look, this thing's broken. She said, don't worry about it. And it's those kind of things that make us look bad as a city. People just throw their arms up and go, what kind of an operation are you guys running here? That happens over and over again, and that's not the kind of reputation that we want. And we get that reputation over and over again. So it's time we do this. I'm all in favor of it, obviously. So let's press on. Councilor Larson.
I think the question of marketing is incredibly important. I've heard some good comments about Mr. Fandler's presentation, apparently at various public hearings, or somebody's presentation. So convince them that exactly what Councilmember McIntosh is saying, that they came in concerned and left satisfied. But I do think we have a big lift to get to the point where people won't quite catch this as surprising to them and won't consider it an arbitrary move on the part of the city. I think part of the justification is looking at the budget itself. And I'm curious to know, when you look at the revenues generated off the current coin system and system that we use, and the cost of operating the meter monitoring, repair systems, actually spending money on the system, we're coming up with a $500,000, $700,000 deficit. And I think I would like to see that memorialized in some way in the presentation of this. You need to understand this is not the question is, why are we doing this? You sort of get the answer, but if the answer is, well, the city needs more money, then that's not going to be too happy. That's what it looks like. The optics are, you're going from 25 cents to $1.50, and it's going to be an expensive change for the people that at least afford it. So I'd like to have, at least in the rollout of this program, some explanation of how that 150 works and why we're running a $700,000 deficit in this category. Why don't we just abandon the program altogether and save ourselves some money? But if it's not generating any money, is the purpose of the meter system to generate money for the city, or is it to generate turnover in parking spaces, or what? And how does this address whatever the goal is for parking meters downtown? That's what I'd like to see that before I can vote on this.
Councilmember Larson, I'll make a comment. We're going to provide the subsidy details that Councilmember Money requested, so we'll make sure that we detail how the city and what efforts those are supporting. And keep in mind, that's a component of this program. And another bigger part of it is the case that Mr. Chairman just highlighted was the user experience component, where we had an interaction with the existing meter that was not pleasant, frankly didn't work, and it gives the poor image of our city. So we're going to solve that problem with this technology solution completely. We think that engagement, the user-friendliness of this application that we've demoed at public meetings will allow for a great experience. And then last thing I'll mention is the fact that I think as we move forward with the $1.50 rollout, we're going to prove that the turnover matters, our curb space has value, and that we're going to assign that with the $1.50 an hour. And in doing so, that will eliminate some of these blatant violations that we're seeing, folks that are going to be staying all day and ignoring or abusing the system because of our broken infrastructure now. All of that is going to make our parking environment, I think, where we need to be from a user experience and from the valuing of that curb space adjacent to our businesses downtown. So that's what I'll say. When we send out some correspondence, we'll try to hit the rest of your points as best as we can, but hopefully that answers the majority of what you were asking.
Is one of the goals to make money?
The goal is not to make
No.
money. The goal is to create a solvent program.
We've covered that on our last two conversations about this. This is not to make money. This is to stop subsidizing downtown parking. Councilmember Clark.
If we didn't have meters, if we went to the small town approach, didn't have meters, the parking spaces downtown would never turn over. People would park there all day long, go into the building, save, even if it's $20 a month for parking in the deck, they would just park there all day long. And we wouldn't have any place to park then.
Yeah, that wasn't a suggestion.
Yeah, anyway.
And that is correct. We actually had that discussion before, exactly what you asked. All right, if we're losing money on this, do we just eliminate that and offer free parking? And the issue is for our downtown businesses, restaurants, folks, they would not survive if people are parked in front of their establishment all day long. They need turnover. They need people to be able to get into their businesses during the day. So the issue on workers, and I live downtown, a lot of the workers are parking in the decks. In the parking, you can get a monthly pass, and it is the cheapest way to park in the downtown by far. And that's where we want people to park, because those on-street parking, you want people that are doing turnover. People that just need to be in here for an hour, 2 hours to park there, and then leave and give it to somebody else to park there. So it is not a money-making proposition at all. It's the break-even proposition and the value that you want to support your downtown businesses, because there is limited parking downtown, and help them survive as ongoing concerns.
People need to know what the cheapest option is. The cheapest option is parking decks. And we need to tell them that's the cheapest option.
Absolutely, and I do think they've tried to do that. We'll do more of that on the marketing side of when it's laid out, but that, for an individual that's got to be in the downtown on a routine basis, the absolute cheapest way to do that is to buy you a monthly parking pass in one of our decks.
And I'll add just two pieces of that. There's been a lot of commentary on the marketing piece. It's not that staff hasn't been prepared or thought about that. The staff lift to get this undertaking to this point has been so great. We had to make sure that we felt like we had something that had a possibility to get over the finish line first before we start investing the time in on the transition, the marketing, the implementation. There's a lot of back-end stuff that staff has got to work through on the back end, marketing being the front of that. And so we're going to do that, but we had to invest a lot of time and effort to think through this carefully to get to this point. I'll say another piece that we've kind of hit on a little bit earlier around the decks, and kind of while we're doing some of these things that we're doing, we don't really have great data on the usage of our decks now. And Councilmember Scipio was at a meeting with me and probably Jeff, probably 2 summers ago on North Trade, when we had a lot of business owners over there that were complaining about the lack of employee parking downtown. And one of the questions was, can we rent spaces in the 6 Cherry Trade deck? And we do have spaces that are available for lease in there. The problem is that we reserve a good portion of the spaces in that deck for our use of the Benton. What I'm hopeful with is when we actually have correct data that shows the usage of this deck, I'm optimistic we're going to be able to go in on the back end and have better numbers to potentially open up more spaces that can be leased for the $43 a month that the chairman mentioned earlier, to give more of those opportunities for employees and businesses that need staff parking downtown. So those are some of the things on the back end that this program provides benefits for our downtown community.
Okay, with that said, can I get a motion?
Move to approve G2.
Second.
We can have a vote?
would abstain.
No, this is not to go to the council level.
All right, that's the last item we have. There's nothing further. We're adjourned.
Finance will be here